Today I'm going to transform one of the first melodies that I ever wrote using only concepts that can be learned in the first year of music theory class. Let's get to it. So let's start with some disclaimers, caveats, and parameters. Number one, there's no right or wrong way to write a melody. Only better and worse ways to achieve your artistic intentions. The melody that we're going to be looking at today is not inherently bad. It just seems really young for who I am as a composer now. Composition is a craft of writing and rewriting and editing and scrapping and reconstructing. Even the best melody in the world is not impervious to change. Number two, there are infinite ways to write a melody. Today I'm going to be showing you exactly one of them along with my very specific thought process. Your results may vary. That would actually be a pretty cool experiment to try. Let's do that. Everyone send me your take on transforming this melody. My email is in the description, and maybe that'll be another video somewhere down the road. Number three, music theory cannot tell you how to write your melody. Even though we're going to be using music theory concepts to transform this melody, I'm still the composer who is making subjective artistic decisions. Number four, this melody exists in the abstract, disembodied from any larger piece. Therefore, the decisions that I'm going to be making about transforming it also exist in the abstract. I would likely make very different choices if this was part of a larger piece and I was going for a specific emotion, color, mood, etc. And number five, for the sake of simplicity, I will, number one, be leaving this melody at exactly 2 measures long. If I was actually going to try to work this into a longer composition, I would probably try to stretch the material and see what all I could get out of it. That concept alone could probably be its own video. Number two, I'm not going to tackle orchestration. This will be simply for piano. And number three, all of the concepts used today will be from Theory 1 and 2, so that means there's no modal borrowing, secondary dominance, anything like that. Again, that could probably be its own video. So with that in mind, let's get started. Alright, so let's start by taking a look at this melody. I wrote this melody when I was in 10th grade. Who knows what for? Probably boredom. I found it in a folder labeled geometry. It's not bad. It starts and ends in a logical spot, that logical spot being tonic. The contour is okay. It could use some work. For me, stepwise motion sounds very young for me as a composer. I like to use more leaps now. So let's talk about melodic contour. While there's not a ton of very rigid rules in Theory 1 and 2 given about melodic contour, there are some basic things that seem to be recurring, like that it would start and end on tonic, and in the middle it would go up to some sort of highest note. Dominant is usually a good choice, and work its way back down to the tonic. And that would give us this sort of basic shape here. Now, of course, it doesn't just have to go up and then back down. That would be kind of boring, and so it can have some sort of squiggly sort of shape. But for the most part, we start on tonic, we go up to some highest note, and then we work our way back down to tonic. So instead of opening with stepwise motion, I'd like to go ahead and outline the tonic chord. That gives us some good strong motion to begin with. And since we're progressing upwards, let's move this note to C instead of down to A, and that'll give us some upward momentum. And because we've done that, let's bump all of these up a step, and this will land on D natural, and that will give the shape its highest note, which is dominant. I kind of like this figure, so I'll go ahead and leave it. That gives us some good medium range voice leading. I'll explain that in a second. And over here, we ended up inadvertently encircling this C with the D, B, C. So let's mimic that motion over here and encircle the tonic note. That also will help us give a little more tension for the resolution. All right, for step 2, we're going to try to harmonize this melody. I'm going to give it the most logical chord, either 1, 4, or 5, probably at half-note intervals. Let's talk about harmonization for a second. So within the diatonic collection, there are 7 individual pitches. We're in G major, so those pitches are G, A, B, C, D, E, and F sharp. Now, if we take those 3 chords, 1, 4, and 5, we can see that all 7 pitches are covered within those 3 chords. The one containing G, B, and D, the 4 containing G, C, and E, and the 5 covering A, D, and F sharp. So let's go ahead and apply that to our melody. For all 3 of these, the melody is also the root of the chord, which I don't think is particularly interesting, so we'll keep that in mind for later. So one good way that we can build up some momentum for the resolution is to speed up the harmonic rhythm, more specifically the rhythm at which the harmony changes. We've been going along changing the chord at half notes, but what if we made these last 2 quarters? That kind of ramps us up for the end of the phrase. There's a particular cadence that we study a lot in Theory 1 and 2, and that's the 1-6-4-5-1 cadence. Our melodic changes that we made have set us up nicely to use that 1-6-4-5-1 cadence. So let's go ahead and do that here. And so this is what we have so far. I think it goes without saying that block chords aren't terribly interesting. So one way that we can get around that without too much extra thought is to give the bass line a pattern. For example, the Alberti bass pattern. The Alberti bass is a particular arpeggiation of the harmony. It uses the pattern lowest, highest, middle, highest. This, number 1, outlines the chord and introduces more movement. 2, it places the bass note on a strong beat. And 3, it gives us a pedal point, which our ears tend to like. So in root position, it would be 1-5-3-5. But if we have an inversion, the bass note of the inversion is on the downbeat instead of the root. So we can go ahead and apply the Alberti bass pattern to our harmony. That would give us a G in root position. Our C's would be in second inversion, keeping the G in the bass. And then 5 would be in first inversion with F sharp in the bass. And then we have our cadence, which moves the chords faster. So we can't really repeat the pattern because it's too short. And so I'll go against the pattern here in favor of better counterpoint. So I'll be looking at the specific note against note here. Another thing that we can do is we can take our rhythm and make it more interesting. And this is really quite subjective decisions that I'm making here. So we have some kind of square sort of rhythmic patterns that are really kind of mechanical and locked in sounding to me. So I'm going to take our first figure and knock it off kilter a little bit and make these 2 16th notes, which, like I said, it takes it from just outlining the tonic triad to sounding more like it actually encircles our landing point here, which is the C. We could just repeat that figure to sequence up to the D natural, but I don't really want to repeat it. So we could go the other direction and make these notes longer rather than shorter. And I think what we could do here is we could use a triplet and make it sound like the melody is working really hard to ascend. So it really earns that highest note in the phrase. And then from there, we really almost have 2 voices in the melody here in this measure. So I'll go ahead and draw them with stems in opposite directions so that you can see what I'm talking about. I want to retain this walk down from D down to G. But also in this lower voice here, retain do, ti, do. So I want to keep that in mind. Like we did with the harmonic rhythm in the last part, we could also increase the speed of our melodic rhythm to give it some more momentum into the cadence. So that would be 16th notes. But if we just went with straight 16th notes, I think that would sound very mechanical and baroque, and that's not really what I'm going for here. So one thing that we can do is we can sort of tie the last and the first 16th notes of a beat together and give it some syncopation, sort of knock it off center. And this is not an exact science, but like I said, I would like to emphasize the walk down. And one way that I can do that is by making those notes longer. And so I'll make sure that I put the D and the C and the B in those positions with the syncopation. And so now we've got our 16th note figures written down, and I'll fill in. So what I can do with the remaining 16th notes is that I can work in our second voice down there. So I'll sequence them downwards. So we could go A, G, and then G, F sharp, and that would give it a strong sort of sense of walk down. Now we've honored both of our voices, and each beat is sort of a bit of a sequence. Not exactly, but it's pretty close. And I do want to go ahead and keep that encircling figure, that A, F sharp, G, to get us back home. So I think this is sounding pretty interesting at this point. So next we can create our own left-hand pattern. If straight 16th note sounds particularly Baroque, I think the Alberti bass sounds particularly classical. So to get rid of that, we can create our own left-hand pattern. I'll start with the bass note and place it on the strong beats, and that'll keep us grounded now that we've knocked our melody off kilter. That'll give us a sense of where we are in time. So we actually need to come up with a pattern now. There are some tricks that we can use here to get more mileage out of our material. And so what I'd like to do is imitate the rhythm of the melody and the shape of our melody in the left hand. So instead of a direct counterpoint with these two 16th notes, let's have them earlier. So we'll start out with two 16th notes, and then they'll be followed by the 16th notes in the melody. And I think that'll give some nice motion without trying too terribly hard. And then our melodic shape goes down and then up there at the end of that measure. So I'm going to try inverting it here. So we'll go up and then down. And I think that works well for the first one, but I'm going to try to intentionally avoid a 3/2 polyrhythm here. So that can just be a dotted quarter. So again, we could try the same pattern here, but I can already tell that we're going to have to mess with it because of our melodic rhythm. So this is a good time to go ahead and point out, don't be afraid to break your pattern if it doesn't make sense. Don't be so married to it that it makes everything else out of whack. So I'm going to break with the pattern here in favor of better counterpoint. And in counterpoint, we typically like 6th and 3rds if possible. So if I can't get one of those, I may just have to abandon that idea altogether in favor of good voice leading in this particular left-hand voice. Then we've got our 1, 6, 4, 5, 7 cadence. That's also going to mess with the pattern because our pattern was 2 beats long and these are only a beat long. So I'm just going to fill this rhythm in with notes from the chords. And then here at the end, I'm going to imitate the pattern just for fun. I think it gives it a little bit more of a flourish there at the end. So the harmony right now is pretty straightforward. So a thing that we can do to make that a little bit more interesting is we can try a reharmonization. And we'll go back to block chords for a second while we try this out. Let's talk about reharmonization. Reharmonization attempts to find a substitute chord, usually with the same function, which will give the melody a different feel. In general, we have 3 different types of chord function in a major key: the tonic, the subdominant, and the dominant. The tonic has the 1, 3, and 6 chords. The subdominant is the 2 and the 4. And the dominant is the 5 and the 7, which, remember that in a major key, the 7 is a diminished chord, which can add some really interesting color. So if we wanted to reharmonize these 3 groups, what we could do is we could replace the 1 in favor of either the 3 or the 6. We could replace the 4 with a 2, and we could replace the 5 with a 7. Like I said, that gives some very interesting color. There are a billion different ways to do reharmonization, and we're sticking to theory 1 and 2 here, so I'll be staying within the diatonic collection. But I think instead of reharmonizing it with other chords from the major key, I think what if we tried putting this in a minor key? That could give it a really interesting sound. So instead of G major, let's try E minor. So what we can do just right off the bat is change all of the major 4 and 5s to minor 4 and 5s. I will keep this C major though. I think that a 6 chord in a minor key is quite lovely and sometimes unexpected. I'd like to go, so I'm going to change our cadence here at the end to a 4-5-1 instead of a 1-6-4-5-1. Perhaps in theory class, you'd more often hear a raised leading tone giving us a major 5 because of the classical era and harmonic minor. But I think that's quite against what we're looking for here, the feel of what we're going for. So I think I'm going to stick to natural minor and go with a minor 5. I think it fits better here. One other thing is I'm going to add a C major chord here just to help with the momentum of this progression. Again, some of these are really subjective decisions. Now that we've decided on our new chords, we can go ahead and plug them into our left-hand pattern that we already created. So again, we'll start with our bass notes on strong beats. I'm going to go ahead and change this first C major to be in second inversion, so that gives us an upward momentum in the bass voice, and that'll make the voice leading just a little bit smoother. I said earlier that I wanted to avoid a 3-2 polyrhythm here, but I think that we can make it a true counterpoint, and so make this a triplet in the left hand, and I think that would sound really, really nice. So let's do that, and we'll go with a pretty strict counterpoint. So we'll give it a sixth, and a 10th here, and that gives it a nice contrary motion to the melody. So now continuing the pattern like we did before creates something interesting because of that chord that I added. Let's see if this causes any problems. So to outline a B minor chord and to tie that F sharp would give us a suspended note in our C major chord, which according to the pattern resolves down. And I may just have to leave it. I love a good C sharp 11. That E is also tied, being a member of both C major and A minor, so it works out pretty well, but I'm wondering, what if it resolved up? G is another member of C major, and having it carry over to the A minor would make it an A minor 7, which I think is more interesting. And from there, I'll just do what I did last time and fill it in with members of the chord. And to have a little bit of fun with this last measure, again, I'm going to make this G an F sharp. That will probably get you points taken off on your theory homework, but I like it enough that it's worth the points off, and it makes the C sharp 11 from earlier not sound as out of place. So I like it. Of course, music isn't just notes and rhythms, it's how we play them. So lastly, let's add some articulation and dynamics. I have been thinking the entire time that I've been working on this that it would sound a little bit better if it was slowed down a few clicks, so maybe let's try 90, and I think that's probably going to work out a little bit better. Obviously, if a real pianist was playing this, they would probably give it some pedaling, just to give it a little bit more resonance, and I think that would be nice. So let's go ahead and add those in. Of course, when you're working with a notation software like this, you have to tell it exactly how you want it played, especially if you're going to stick it into a VST instrument. And as I've been listening to this melody hundreds of times now, I think the most natural shape of the phrase is soft, and then it grows and it peaks about right here, and then it dies back down for the resolution. And that would give us this sort of dynamic shape. But I think the melody isn't compelling enough to justify a forte marking here. And that, I said I wasn't going to get into orchestration, but that's kind of sort of what we're getting into. It's bleeding over there a little bit. And so what you want to do is you want to orchestrate your piece in such a way that you don't have to rely on dynamic markings so that the player knows how to play it. If you write your melody in such a way, it becomes really, really natural and really, really obvious which kind of dynamic shape it should have. So what I want is for the melody itself to reflect getting louder. So I want to make one final adjustment. I'm going to give this last bar here an octave displacement, pivoting on this downbeat, which means that I'm going to have to change this pattern a little bit. And at this point, I'm making changes that I can't really justify or explain. So maybe let's just stop there. Let's go ahead and remind everyone of the original melody. And then using concepts from Theory 1 and 2, for the most part, a little bit of wiggle room here and there, we have transformed this melody to this. Again, really what it comes down to is what is your artistic intention and how can you best achieve that. And so hopefully you found something helpful in this video on how to transform your own melodies. If you would like to submit your own transformation of this melody, my email is in the description below. I'm really curious to see what you guys come up with. And let me know what you think of this video. It was a little bit different. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you're new to this channel, I do videos on music theory, music composition, and music history. So if you haven't already, subscribe to this channel for more videos. If you would like to be notified of when a new video has come out, make sure to join my email list, where I'll let you know about new video releases as well as other free musical resources. And if you really like the work that I do and would like to support it and see more of it, come join the community over on Patreon. Thank you so much, and I'll see you next time.